I'm really excited for this panel because I think one of the things that we need to talk about as a community of progressives is how we have included abortion activism before Roe, historically, where we've been. And so we really want to talk about the fact that post-abortion doesn't mean, or post-Roe doesn't mean post-abortion, but we all need to step up, right? So we're going to talk about where we're at. We're going to talk about what you can do to protect access, and more importantly, how you can activate if you are not activated, or get more activated, because we need to not only protect what's left, we need to get back and then move forward so that we can expand access to abortion care. Before we get to it, I want you to meet this fabulous panel. I'm going to have each person talk, tell you their name, their pronouns, and what their work is in the movement, and then you're going to be like, these are the best people to have this conversation in the right now. So I'm going to turn to my left and to Cece.
Hello all, my name is Caitlin Crusoe, but I go by Cece, it's much cuter. I use they and them pronouns, so when you talk about me later, you could say, damn, they were awesome. I am the digital organizing manager for Plan C Pills, which is a nonprofit information campaign all about medication abortion access in the US. We run a state-by-state guide to abortion pills all across the country. We link out to legal and medical support, and we have a robust guide with a frequently asked questions section to really make sure that people know everything they need to safely self-manage at home. Prior to Plan C Pills, I worked with Advocates for Youth and did a lot of work with young people surrounding abortion access and sexual health and rights. So you'll often hear me talk about centering young people's voices and how we need to turn to young leaders in this moment. But that's a little bit about me, and I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tara Murtha. It's good to be here. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Strategic Communications at Women's Law Project. That's a public interest legal organization based here in Pennsylvania, state-focused. We work across a broad range of topics, but have always seen reproductive rights, health, access, and justice as the keystone to that broad scope of interrelated issues. So right now, of course, we're all abortion all the time. Part of our practice, and a unique part of it, is that we have been representing Pennsylvania's abortion providers since the 1970s, so have the long view. In both day-to-day compliance, which is challenging given there are, at last count, 1,237 pages of regulations and statute governing abortion care in Pennsylvania alone. That is not always coherent with federal law and policy also. And our main strategies are impact litigation. In addition to the day-to-day compliance, right now we're preparing arguments to present before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court this fall, challenging the state's discriminatory ban on Medicaid coverage of abortion, and within that suit, asking the court to actively affirm reproductive rights is enshrined within our state constitution. Another strategy is policy advocacy. Helping develop it, warning you about the bad ones, all that kind of stuff, working with the state legislature, which I do a lot, advising about the bills and the issues and what's needed, and community education, of course, which is, I consider this a part of. So grateful to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Chillian. My pronouns are she and her. I am here in the capacity in my role at Northland Family Planning Centers. I am the Vice President of External Operations, and I work in clinic care, but I do a lot of advocacy work and a lot of security work and dealing with legal issues around our clinics. We have 3 clinics in the Metro Detroit area, founded in 1976, and we've been a community care provider since then, providing abortion care up to the legal limit in Michigan. And in my spare/volunteer time, I'm the president of an abortion fund based in Southeast Michigan called Reclaim.
Hi, I'm Kristen Haiti, she, her. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator with Abortion Access Front, and I also run our clinic escort program at our Indy Clinic in Toledo, Ohio, Toledo Women's Center. I'm also on the board of our abortion fund, the Agnes Reynolds Jackson Fund, the Aggie Fund for short. We used to be a small local abortion fund, but in the last several months, we've been able to start funding throughout Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, solidarity requests in DC and elsewhere. So we've really kind of branched out, and I'm excited to be here.
And I'm Lizz Winstead. I am the founder and chief creative officer at Abortion Access Front, and you can learn about our work at our booth. I don't need to go into it. These people are more interesting. Before we kick off where we're at and what we can do, I think it's important to have a little bit of a discussion of how we got here. I think that who are the players involved in the anti-abortion movement, how they intersect with the policies that got us here, and then maybe throw in a little bit about how we let them sort of get those policies together. So Tara, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk just a little bit about how we got here. Like how has this movement led us to this place?
Well, we have been strategically, I shouldn't even say we, all of it. Abortion, the procedure, people who need abortion care, the movement advocating for equitable access to the full range of evidence-based care has been strategically isolated in every way possible. The procedure itself has been isolated, moved out, of hospitals. The movement, which we're here to talk about, has been isolated in a lot of ways, isolated, and it's another word for stigmatized, within the broader progressive movement, right? So it hasn't, our movement has been impeded greatly by this isolation within the broader progressive movement. And to take some accountability, I'll say that racial inequity and racism and classism within the repro movement has compounded the harm of the misogyny of our tangential progressive movements, right? And all served to our detriment to isolate us here. And now we're at this point where, it's such a fiction. Abortion isn't isolated from any issue that anybody in this building is working on. And in fact, I get it. We're all in, there's this energetic scarcity, right? The society, this whole mission is designed to exhaust us. So I understand the impulse to say, look, I am so busy working on my issue. Like, I care about it, but you guys got that, I'm going to be over here working on my issue. But I can tell you, we can play a little game show of whatever your issue is, the other side of it is abortion access and is abortion. And if we think we're too busy to get to the repro part, that doesn't mean, all that says to me is that you're failing at whatever your mission is, whatever your specific primary issue is, right? Because abortion and abortion access is the keystone to racial and gender justice. And you can't succeed in whatever your respective main primary issue is unless you are looking square in the face of racial and gender justice, which is abortion access. Especially at this moment in time, mass incarceration, abortion access. LGBTQ rights, obviously, abortion access. Those are two sides of the same coin. It's all about deviating from perceived what we have been sold as traditional, but it's really fictitious, binary gender norms, right? So I would say that that's the big picture of how we got to this place. And it's clear, given that, the only solution is for us to, we're in the city of bridges, build these bridges between the movements and understand and mine the intersections of where they happen. Even, I would say, dare I say, democracy itself, which is absolutely true.
Well, and one of the things that we do at Abortion Access Front is every time we see some horrifying person who is doing harm in some other issue area, we do deep dives and always find where that intersection is with being horrible on this issue. And so sometimes we can be really helpful in talking about who are these people who are tracking undocumented folks and trying to harm them. Oh, turns out they're outside of the clinic every Saturday being assholes too. Let's talk so that we can really be working together on that. Who are these cops who are constantly harming people? Turns out not only are they not helping at clinics, they're bringing water to protesters. So it's very the intersections are real, and they're really important for all of us, politicians, bad actors, influencers on that side. We're all together in this, and so let's talk, right? Because one of the reasons this panel is really important to me, and talking to progressives, and I've been at Netroots since 2007, like every Netroots I've been to, and I came in as a generalist activist, comedian, and because my work drastically shifted to abortion was because we as a movement weren't, Ashley told me to stop it. You're siloed, stop it. We liked you better when you were just like doing this thing because I didn't want to be there. So the panel's for folks who, if you were surprised when the Alito leak came out, we want to talk to you. If you were not surprised, we want to talk to you for a different reason. Where have you been? And so I think I want to start out with laying out, and Laura, I'm going to go to you first on this question. You've been sounding alarms for decades.
Decades.
You have been involved in progressive politics in Michigan for decades. Will you talk a little bit about what it's like being a provider for as long as you have, being an activist for as long as you have, and the resistance that you've met, in trying to let folks know how long this has been happening?
So I just want to start by saying that I'm a second-generation abortion provider. So the clinics that I work at and choose to work at every day were founded by my mom in 1976. So I've been in this movement, in this care for a long time, but I continue to choose it every day because it is vitally important to equal rights everywhere and for people to have bodily autonomy and their own human rights. For decades, we've been screaming from the rooftops that this is basically, since Roe v. Wade was passed, there's been a strategic movement, a very well-funded strategic movement to get to where we got this year with the overturning of the decision. It has been well-funded, strategic, stacking the courts, local governments, school boards, everywhere you look, has been a focus of the right-wing, white supremacist organizations to put this where we are today and make sure that we don't have control over our own bodies. We've been trying to talk to people about this for years, pointing out exactly where this is happening in the lower courts, in the higher courts, in the running for office, running for elected positions, sheriff positions, places where they can have power over other people and to erode this right. We've been blown off. We've been treated like we are exaggerating, alarmists, treated as though we are just extremely over, we're never gonna lose it. I remember talking about this in high school, in college, my friends who are very progressive saying, oh, that's just insane, that's never gonna happen. But we've been watching it happen, and it's been honestly emotionally traumatic and horrific to be surrounded by people that say they care but have been pretty much telling you that you're just kind of crazy and we're never gonna get there, and here we are. So one of the things that I think has been really harmful to the progressive movement overall is how, as Tara mentioned, that we've been siloed out. They don't want abortion at the table because it's icky, and it disturbs like the whole cohesive movement, which is BS. But that's how we've been treated for so long. And so not being really siloed out and not really allowed at the table in the progressive movement overall has really been harmful and has assisted in the efforts to get us where we are today.
Yeah. And the consistent drumbeat of saying that we are selfish because we are unwilling to compromise, to me, is the core foundation of where the harm comes from, because it's saying that your body is a place with which we can place you on a political, you can have some rights about your body, but there is part of your body that other people get to have a say in, and that's been okay in this movement. And that's the part that I want to talk to you, Kristen, because as somebody who is working as a clinic escort and who is in the face of anti-abortion extremists every day, and has been sounding the alarm, talk about the escalation of violence and how that escalation was allowed to happen because of the lack of participation in the larger space.
Absolutely. I mean, anyone who works at a clinic, escorts outside of a clinic, is in any clinic space at all, has really seen how bad it's gotten in the last few years. We're seeing more people on our sidewalks. We are seeing more threats. Our clinic last year, there was an attempted arson, and these are just becoming more commonplace, and we're seeing these threats. And what's infuriating about it is no one's believed us. I started escorting and we just went, and it was what we did, and eventually we had to start social media, not because I'm great at it, I'm not. But I would say something, I would tell people about what was happening, and no one believes you. No one literally will just listen to the words out of our mouths and our experiences. And so we tried to show people, and we've been doing it for years, and even then, when all of this was coming up, it's been infuriating that people still don't listen to us, and we are the ones that are told we have to compromise. We have to tone down what we say. Don't say abortion so much, say reproductive rights. Abortion really turns people off. Well, guess what? If you can't say abortion, then that's on you, and that's something that's going to require something to look into yourself. If you can't say the literal word, but you call yourself an ally, you say you support us, we don't want you. Your support is more harmful than anything else, because you are telling us that we are not equal in our movement, that we can't exist as we are. And it's right, we are being asked to compromise on our bodies, on our freedoms, on our rights. It's like we just cut a little bit of yourself off to make it okay for everybody else. But when you compromise, it gets worse. If we give them, all right, fine, we'll give you an arbitrary gestational limit and say, fine, that's compromise. Well, guess what? Next time, they're going to want a few more weeks off of that. And then next time, they're going to want a few more. And this is literally where we are, because we've been told we have to compromise. And the people in the middle, we have to say we have to meet them in the middle. They need to come to us. Why are we the ones that have to go to them? And so watching the threats happen and all of this legislative horror that got us to where we were, it's a little hard sometimes to not be bitter and say, well, maybe if you would listen to us 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, we wouldn't actually be here.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think also it's just a reevaluation, because before I got into this movement, I think I had a lot of stigmatizing language around it. I've been pro-choice my whole life. I told my abortion story in 1992 on Comedy Central, but I used the caveats. The only language I was given was from anti-abortion people. And so I steeped in and perpetuated it. But I think another thing, just to go off that before we go to Tara, is if you can't say abortion, people who've had them and people who provide them will not trust you to confide in you. And so if people aren't talking to you about their abortions, or if you're like, I don't really know anyone who's had an abortion, I ask that you do a self-evaluation of how you present or talk about it, because you may not even realize that you thought maybe you were a person who had open arms and thoughts, but maybe not. And Tara, to that point, the anti-abortion language, you've been in Pennsylvania for a long time, a big turning point for this movement was when Gosnell happened. And they were able to frame this murderous nightmare human as some sort of standard of care. I'd love for you to talk about, again, the vacuum that allowed Gosnell to be this talking point that we're still fighting now.
Yeah, there's actually currently a new podcast about Gosnell. It's their, the anti-abortion movement loves the Gosnell story because specifically they love the distortion that they have created out of the Gosnell story, which they've used to undergird all sorts of bans.
Are you all familiar with Gosnell? All right, Terry, you want to give a little brief on Gosnell, if you can?
He's a person sitting in prison where he belongs because he had started out as an abortion provider and over the years shifted into something else. He, ran a basically, underground practice that targeted. He filled the vacuum of equitable access to legal, reproductive, well-regulated care and preyed on women of color in Philadelphia and immigrants and people who did not have equitable access to legitimate care. So this was in 2010 or so, 2011, lifetimes ago. I was a journalist in Philadelphia at the time. And I covered it, despite what you hear, that what the media doesn't want you to know. That's the big narrative from the anti-abortion, even though it takes 4 seconds to Google and you'll see thousands and thousands of hits. It's one of those easily disproven narrative talking points. But what I traced and continued to follow and report on was the real-time distortion of the reality of the case and the way that the narrative was twisted immediately in Pennsylvania, seized upon to pass ASF law, which is an overregulation of clinics designed to force clinics to close. And it requires that facilities providing abortion care adhere to guidelines created for ambulatory surgical facilities, which handle much more complex. So we're talking about, and you can speak to this in great detail, I'm sure, as a provider. So much like, anyway, so that's the long and short of the Gosnell part. But the broader issue being, I was a journalist in Philadelphia covering it and covering reproductive health policy and abortion policy because, in part, really no one else was. I worked at a alt weekly, so I had the luxury of deciding what I wanted to cover and kind of carving out my own situations. And I noticed time and time again, whenever something involving abortion came up, basically, a local outlet would send out the intern and get a quote from the president of Planned Parenthood saying, no, this bill won't improve safety, and then get a quote from some, whack job saying, no, but it does, we're out here to protect women, So that doesn't illuminate anything for the reader. And all that to say that the media environment, the movement being isolated is reflected in the media coverage, which now, as a comms person in the movement, I have the luxury problem of the onslaught of sudden interest in what's happening and trying to onboard people into the history. It's a very complex history of a lot of moving parts that is often, the coverage that we're getting now isn't often accurate. The phrasing is wrong, and to your point about using anti-abortion phrases, we see anti-abortion phrases even in articles that I can really tell is striving to be evidence-based and to be clear and not stuck in the mire of both sidesism, which of course is a right-wing strategy because you keep moving the goalpost to the right and so the center moves to the right and so on. So I've really seen the media narratives reflect the isolation and stigma that we have perpetuated within the broader progressive movement.
But I think, Cece, it's so exciting because with seeing activist groups pop up reclaiming abortion, pro-abortion is perfectly fine to say, and saying it enough so that people who are uncomfortable with it will have a dialogue with you about it is really great. And you are bringing this incredible thing that we've never talked about in this movement at all, which is the safety of self-managing your own abortion and being able to do that without shame and stigma. If you could talk a little bit, that's a leaps and bounds incredible thing, and the work that you're doing is incredible. Will you talk a little bit about this amazing step forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we talk about compromise and isolation in the general movement, and even in the abortion rights movement, self-managed abortion has been isolated and has been stigmatized. It's been a really touchy subject. and for good reason. It's iffy with legality. It carries some risk that we have to be very real and frank about when we talk about who criminalization often falls upon the hardest. But it's also this radical, creative, alternative route of access for people who otherwise have no options. So we've been safely self-managing abortions since the beginning of time. Like, abortions predate the Bible. We've been doing this. This is nothing new.
What? Something predates the Bible?
So you would think that by now, it's been approved, medication abortion has been approved in the US for over 20 years. You would think that by now people would know about this option, but it's been demonized. The ability for us to take our own care into our own hands is a conservative's worst nightmare. And it's also complicated for even some progressives to wrap their heads around. And I think too, to uplift like the issue of young people in this particular movement too, we see a lot of young folks who are self-managing. And we also know that young folks are often the ones on the chopping block in the abortion rights movement in general as well. They're often the persons or the peoples that we're compromising on and that are further stigmatized. So I think there's a lot of overlap within youth access and self-managed abortion access. And I know that a lot of folks may not have been paying attention and may not know much about self-managed abortion, or may have had some of those tricky feelings about it, or still don't know where they stand. And it's okay if you have those feelings of guilt or those feelings of uncertainty, but what I'm going to call for you all to do is to metabolize that into real transformative action. Because right now, as it stands, options are increasingly limited in restricted states, and this may be one of the only options, in addition to traveling out of state with the support of funds and practical support organizations. But we need to make sure that everybody knows this is an option available to them, regardless of what folks say about the demonization of self-managed abortion or how demonic it is. We want to make sure that everybody knows abortion pills are still an option if somebody wants that for themselves, and that's the decision that's right for them.
I'm on Team Demon. I feel like I'm totally on Team Demon with that.
Absolutely.
Demon time.
And also just in talking about self-managed abortion, I think, the narratives that we've had around what happens when legal abortion is not a federal thing, sometimes things are safe just because the government doesn't say they are. But also that brings up that hanger narrative. I think that we all think that, you think back to those times when that was like this symbol of what happens. And just for those of you who are still sort of in that mindset, just thinking about the fact that I'm the youngest of 5 kids by 13 years. My oldest siblings are in their 70s. When they see hangers, it's triggering. It is not emancipating. It makes them feel like they're reminded of times, and sometimes they feel like people are carrying hangers without really thinking about those who actually had to go through those times. But the bigger thing, too, when we talk about self-managed abortion is if you have a hanger, it's an opportunity that you're not talking about self-managing abortion safely and the opportunities that we have doing it now. So if you were in that mindset, I just want you to think a little bit about that, because I think it's really important as we're moving forward and becoming activists in this post-Roe landscape, how we're talking about how we're doing this. I think that's super key. So I want to talk a little bit about, how we step up, where we're seeing wins. We look at Kansas, it's a win. We're looking at Michigan, it's a win. But I think also looking at if our rights are on the ballot, we're not winning from a really solid place. And also looking at Kansas, and I'm sure Michigan as well, though I don't have data on it, how many people are saying, yes, I want a constitutional amendment to abortion, but in the same, primary in Kansas, for example, people are voting for the politicians who are actually creating the bans. So I would love to talk a little bit about not just saying one of the things we need to do is vote, but how do we vote smarter? And Tara, I want to go to you first on this, because if someone's just pro-choice or just has a D next to their name, please make no assumptions. Tara, talk about where we should be targeted and looking when we're talking about voting and how we want to mobilize, and what we should be asking of the people running so that we can guarantee they actually give a fuck.
Thanks. Yeah. So the way it works is that often, here in Pennsylvania, in many state legislatures, the majority party decides what bills come to the committee for a vote. So a bill could be introduced, and if they're in charge of scheduling the votes, they can simply studiously ignore that bill for the 2-year legislative session, and then it dies, and then it has to be reintroduced again. And that spares lawmakers from their constituents learning what their position on the bill is, right? So you have to call out the lawmaker in particular. I mean, start with there are organizations, well, to totally back up, no need to reinvent the wheel, okay? We don't need to start our own organizations, and we are out here doing the work. Look up your local and state-based providers, legal organizations, funds, that kind of thing. Sign up to all those lists and onboard yourself with the basic information. But when it comes to voting, yes, their positions have been obscured by the takeover, the strategic takeover of state legislatures. Look up Operation Red Map, right? That's how we got where we are, launched in 2010, and ta-da, here we are today.
Write it down, Operation Red Map, write it down.
So that's...
Or act like you're doing it, because I'm looking at you. You all pulled out a piece of paper.
Promise me you'll look it up. Anyway, so you do need to actually call out your lawmakers, ask them, call their offices, ask them their position on abortion, ask them their position on specific abortion bills that are being proposed or that could be proposed. Publicize their answers, publicize their refusal to answer you. There's, one little glimmer of fun that we can have and also be effective is shame your local politician. I'm a strong believer in shame because let me tell you, Pennsylvania is a huge state, right? People do not know what their lawmaker is up to in Harrisburg, right? They say one thing when they're home at the hot dog stand and whatnot, and then they come to the Capitol and they vote to deprive the people that they're chummy with of our right to bodily autonomy. So we absolutely have to look at those ballot, the orgs that do the audits, but call them, build your relationship with your state and local lawmakers, because guess what? The opposition has those relationships. They are darkening doors every single day. They are not waiting for, something to be introduced that they oppose to make their position known. Make life hard for your local politician. And again, publicly shame them, call them out, tag them on social media. They hate it because they're not used to it.
That's
because
right.
They hear from people when there's something that's so egregious that it might make it into the media, and then they get a little ruffle of, and those form emails, yes, do them, but honestly, real talk, they have filters that filter them into the trash, okay? Flood their phones, flood their fax lines, and you have to build the relationship / publicly shame them into revealing what their position is.
Yep, and I think I remember my sisters and I once called and said, how can you advocate for me if you don't know me? Why won't you meet with me?
Mm-hmm.
If they don't, that is the worst. It's just because there's no right answer to that other than, I guess I better meet with you, right?
Yes.
So there's ways that you can make people feel and fun ways, right? There's a lot of
Very
fun
fun
ways
ways.
to actually do that. And also, the more creative you can be, you will get media attention on it. If you can be out there and talking to them, you could show up literally outside the office of your state rep, wearing your clothes, but over your clothes a hospital gown. And why are you here? I'm here for my appointment, but I'm not a gynecologist. Well, then why are you acting like one?
Yeah, and don't wait for an invitation.
Don't
because
wait
it's
for an
not
invitation.
coming.
Just get your friends together. Why not? What can they say? And then you're having fun. It's the best. The media loves something visual, and you've just created a stir. And then they're like, why are you here? Then you get to talk to your media and say, because XYZ, and folks who are watching the local news and just saw the story about adopt this cute puppy are all of a sudden also going to hear, this fucker wants to take away your rights, and you've done a service. Right? So I wanted to move to you, Cece, because it's always voting and I think that we get comfortable in voting just, right? I think that Democrats in particular are very good at getting one win and taking a vacation for about 5 years, right? It's kind of like patriarchy doesn't take a holiday. So will you talk about what that means when we talk, you love to talk about, and I love hearing you talk about the multiplicity of tactics. So if you could just bring us home on some of that and what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you were just speaking to this idea that, yeah, these politicians aren't talking to folks who have had abortions. And I think the prime example of that would be one of our friends, I say that very loosely, Joe Biden, who has still yet to meet with people who have had abortions, despite continued demands from the movement, asking for him to just sit down with people who have had abortions and listen to their stories. So we know that we have to agitate our conservative counterparts, our anti-abortionists. We know we have to agitate them and get on their nerves. The trickier part, the important part, the multiplicity of tactics part, is we also have to agitate our friends and our allies. Because we see that the Democratic Party and the progressive entities are often supporting anti-abortionist candidates still, even still. And we need to make sure that they know that is not acceptable. We need to be pushing our friends and our allies further left and further into action around abortion access, or else we are going to go nowhere. So as much as I am all about going to like your local conservative's office and like causing a scene, I also think we should be doing that with our local progressive candidates.
Yes.
And causing
Yes.
a scene and reminding them who they work for and what we are demanding. So yeah, I definitely think in order for us to win, we have to make sure that these allies know repro is the through line. And we will not make the progress that the opposition is unless we recognize that, because the opposition is organized, they have money, they have politicians in their pocket. And what we can ultimately do outside of that voting system is to continue to agitate our allies who are in office to be better and to do better by us, to make sure abortion access is protected for decades to come.
And you have to decide in yourself, in your bones, that you're going to demand that. Like, it also has to be, you have to be thinking about prioritizing it, because the more powerful you are in demanding that they only do what we demand of them. If we're giving them a pass because they say they'll vote against every shitty bill, that's not really advocating for us at all. And we can't allow that to happen. So you have to decide that for yourself too, as a person doing it. So I think, gosh, we could talk all day. So I guess as we talk about demanding what is part of what we want from politicians, I wanted to talk about what we should be asking of ourselves, but I think I want to really get to some solutions. So I think what I want to get to is how we can lay out for folks some things that part of this chasm is you didn't know because the media doesn't tell us and we're in a void and we can be mad about that, but also there's a shit ton to do. So let's get to the shit ton to do part, right? So that we can all think about what that is. And Cece, I'm going to start with you on the shit ton to do part. Let's talk about that. And also just knowing that Plan C and CC are at a booth 105. You can pop over to booth 105. So anything that CC says, and you're like, I want to learn more about self-managed abortion, go over there and get that. So,
Yeah.
ma'am.
All right. Yeah, so there is so much shit to do, y'all. And we have been seeing the influx of interest and activation around self-managed abortion over the last couple months. Our Ambassadors of Information program has grown 20-fold since September 1st, when the ban in Texas went into effect. So it's very clear that there is a sudden renewed interest in making this information available widely, because it is a possible solution. It's not the one solution. It is not a one-size-fits-all solution by any means. We still must protect clinics. We still must protect funds and practical support organizations. And we have to make sure that people know abortion pills at home are an option for them, regardless of the state they live in, and that there are legal and medical supports available to them to help mitigate risk and to make sure that they can safely self-manage at home and feel as comfortable in that decision as they wish. So there are amazing resources like our Plan C Guide to Pills that we are encouraging folks spread the word far and wide about. We've distributed over 2 million pieces of Plan C material in the last year, all across the country, even in Alaska, which I'm super geeked about. And yeah, we're also pushing out the word about the If, When, How Repro Legal Helpline. Everyone needs to know about these 3 resources, and this is what I'll leave you with. The Plan C Guide to Pills find out how and where people are accessing abortion pills by mail, regardless of what the state and the Supreme Court says. The Repro Legal Helpline, who can offer legal support and information, and in the case of potential prosecution, even legal aid and legal representation and bail funds. They are an incredible hotline that I would recommend always keeping in your back pocket. And then the Miscarriage and Abortion Hotline, which is a team of trained medical professionals that can offer medical support to folks self-managing at home. So I always say that's my little self-managed abortion toolkit. Those 3 resources really are truly what you need, and you can find all of that information on our guide. And the best thing you can do right now, one of the best things, I'm sure there are so many more that are about to be shared, is getting the word out that this is still an option and there are people here to help you. And you are not alone in this. It might be self-managed, but you have a community of people rallying around you to make sure that you get the care you need.
That's right. Laura, as a clinic, what's going on? What do you need help with?
Everything. We are extremely overwhelmed, currently in a state that has access to care. So we are overwhelmed and inundated with patients crossing state lines and seeking care, but also needing financial assistance and practical support. Don't try and recreate the wheel, there are organizations out there. If you want to help, join them. Look them up. NNAF, the National Network of Abortion Funds, is a great place to start. I Need an A is a great place to start. You can see these organizations that are doing the work. So, and please stop using the rhetoric, the camping analogies, the auntie networks. They're not helpful. They're actually further stigmatizing. And I understand that there is real concern and fear in some states about aiding and abetting because there is legal issues with that, but those things are more harmful than helpful. They're further stigmatizing, and we're still allowing the anti-abortion movement to control the narrative when we're doing that. So support your local clinics. If you have local clinics, they're becoming less and less, but the ones that exist need your help. They need your support. Reach out to them, see if there's anything you can do to support them, and ask them what they need. They'll tell you what's helpful and what's not helpful. For example, counter-protesting without asking and talking to the clinic first, not necessarily helpful. In fact, it can cause a lot more confusion and actually create a safety issue outside of the clinics for patients seeking care. So think about and reach out to the organizations that already exist and to your local clinics.
And I would just say, if you are going to reach out to your local clinics, and we're going to talk about ways that will help you safely access local clinics, if the word hotline is involved in any number, do not call that number and say, I want to help. Call a main number, because hotlines are literally just for that. Like, let's just think about how to support on hotlines. Tara, what are you going to tell folks?
So we already went over the, agitate your state lawmakers, but I'll just add a couple tactics to that. If you want to share your story, that kind of thing, again, don't wait for an invitation. Ask if you can testify. I mean, this is supposed to be our legislatures, right? And then if typically there's no debate, and then again, publicize that. But amplify good information. Again, find 3-4 solid local state organizations that are pumping out real information. I mean, we're in a world of studious disinformation campaigns, right? So just amplify that good information. Talk to your own community. That isolation, the civil citizen vigilante laws, that's part of the isolation. That's to isolate the pregnant person so they can't trust anyone around them because their friends and neighbors have been financially incentivized to hunt down their period schedule, right? It's insane. So make sure that the people in your own community know that you're a trusted person, and help people feel less isolated. A lot of people are worried about, right now in this building, there's people who are probably worried about if they're pregnant. God knows what the laws are in their state. And when there's these threats to go after people that you know. So start there, and then start even internally, again, to Liz's point about questioning your own hesitance about getting involved. Abortion is not controversial, okay?
Yes, say that again.
Abortion has always happened. The procedure itself has always happened, always will. If we're more about what's the polling say in the United States, most People support legal access to abortion. It's not controversial. That's another fiction. When the vast majority of the people have one perspective, but we're ruled by people who are trying to deprive us of that and have the opposite perspective, the word for that is not controversy, it's oppression, right? So let's just get that out as well. It's not controversial. So really audit yourself for what that hesitancy is, and move forward.
That's awesome.
And be brave.
And so everything that everyone said today, I'm going to just say something that's going to make you really happy. Abortion Access Front this year realized that people have constantly been marching and given no marching orders when it comes to abortion access. There hasn't been a place where we can go and learn. There hasn't been a place where you can check out a landscape of what's available to you within abortion justice activism, and then check in with yourself about your own capacities and how you can help. Well, now there is. There's a website. We have done a 5-part series called Operation Save Abortion that breaks down these things, and that each episode of the series comes with a toolkit. We recommend you watch it with friends and then do the exercises in the toolkit, do the whole series so that then you can decide what to do. And we're vetting everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Kristen now because this is Kristen's baby. Kristen worked very hard crafting this entire program, and so Kristen's going to talk a little bit to you about how you can sign up to volunteer. Do it brief, Kristen, and then if you want, we can get over to if you come to the Abortion Access Front booth, you can get a little bit more download there. But Kristen, take it away.
Yeah, as we've talked about, we've known Roe was going down for a very long time, and as a national org, is that how can we approach this? What is our role, and how can we improve this movement? And really, it's just being a conduit and taking some of the weight off of clinic and advocacy orgs and activists and their groups and their shoulders, because everyone is at max capacity. Everyone is doing all of the work and then some. So we approached Operation Save Abortion, and we grounded this through the lens of reproductive justice, and that was first and foremost where we started. And we talked, it was almost like Abortion 101 for those folks who are like, I didn't know this was happening, now I'm mad, what can I do? And also for those other ones who are like, come sleep on my couch, I started an anti-network, and it's like, okay, let's just reel it in, and let's talk about why this is harmful. And we put on this this series in July, and we had over 10,000 people
Watched a
register.
7-hour live stream that we
Which
divided up into these series.
I think sometimes we can be a little jaded in this movement and doing all of this work. I'm like, is this going to work? Is this going to be effective? And the absolutely magical thing was people were doing the work. In the comment sections, they were challenging each other. They were having conversations. They were creating separate Zooms, in their regions to say, hey, come work through this with me. We can do this together. And so at the end of this, we take all of these people who have now said, okay, I want to help. I've learned about the movement, the different ways I can be involved. And we bring them in, and we do vetting, because safety is incredibly
We're vetting
important.
10,000 people, y'all.
Yeah.
We are vetting 10,000
We're working on it. Be patient.
Yeah, so be patient. If you do the training and you want to get vetted, we have things you can do safely, but the vetting takes a hot second.
Yeah, it's
because we have to vet the vetters. It's a fucking whole shit show, but it's awesome.
But so we take all of these people, and we had hundreds of meetings with amazing orgs from all over the countries, clinics, funds, advocacy, and then once these folks are vetted, we take them and we just send them out to the orgs that need that people power. So they didn't have time to bring them in. They didn't have time to recruit. They didn't have time to vet. We take care of that, and then we send them the people power. And it's local and regional. It's the people that you're around. And so we're stoked how this
It's really
went.
exciting. And we do have to wrap because we're running long, but I just also want to say, too, the other thing that's really great at OperationSaveAbortion.com is there is an active activist calendar that is national activities, and then you can pull down by region so that you can participate in webinar trainings about self-managed abortion. We're setting up all this kind of stuff with all different activists so you can do where you live or just generalize things where you can get information. If you want to hear more about it or talk more about it with us, it's over at our booth. We're going to just wrap up really quick, but I want you to look at all of these social handles right here. And I would like you to follow all those people because they are offering incredible information. And please come and learn about Plan C and self-managed abortion. Please come to our booth because we can, it's like, we have this sort of like, oh my God, there was so much. And if you heard several times, find these organizations, we want to help you do that. So thank you so much for showing up today. You actually cared. Thank you all for streaming. And I'm just really appreciative that you're here. One of the things that scares me the most in this movement is now that you know, you won't step up. I wake up every day and hope that that will change. So don't let us all down. We need you. We're tired. We need some reinforcements. Y'all are awesome. Thank you. Thank you, panel. You're amazing. We're done. Thank you.
You can't escape us.
You know what? It's the long net routes. I had some drinks last night, I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, oh my God, I got another thing. What is happening? Okay, so questions. This is great. Love you all. Let's start here. We can get to all your questions because I'm a dick. Amazing.
Hey, we're exhausted.
I know.
Right.
I love that no one left and they're like, bitch, no, we are not done.
To go to a couple of points made to kind of like share like a win story, like this can happen.
I love a win.
Yes, absolutely. My name is Angelica from Bold Futures in New Mexico, and to prove to your point, like if you hold your legislators accountable, it can happen. In 2019, all of our organizers tried to make sure that we could get the dormant ban off the books because, again, like we also knew that Roe was going to fall. And, like,
Can I stop? Could you just explain a little bit about, because I don't know if y'all know, but how these dormant bans, they're called zombie bans. Would you explain just a little bit about what that is? And I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So pre the Roe v. Wade decision, in New Mexico, there was a law that said that abortion could be criminalized. And it was just a one-line thing that everyone thought that they could kind of hide under the rug. And we're like, no, we know that this is on the books. And so we want to make sure, even though this isn't enforceable right now, we want to get this ban off the books. And so we worked in 2019 to get that removed. But then, like you said, there were those Democrat legislators who in the state Senate, they were like, oh, well, like I have this misinformation from the anti, so I'm going to vote no on it. And it's like, listen, motherfuckers, like we're trying to like pull you in and have these meetings and like and tell you what this information is. And again, you're not meeting with us. So over the next 2 years, organizers, and New Mexico is a large rural state too, we met with our legislators, and this is also still a state, the only state in the U.S. where our legislators are not paid.
Oh.
No one is paid in the House or Senate for the state legislature. So we're also getting people to run and replace these Democrats who voted no on the dormant to remove the ban, and we got all of them replaced. We successfully passed that in 2021.
Nice.
Rural and access is still an issue, but people can get legal abortion care there, and so it can be done to kind of.
No, I think that's so smart because I just have to say in New York too, New Yorkers didn't realize that we had 18 anti-abortion Democrats in our state, and we got rid of almost all of them by simply going, oh, by the way, did you know? And people were like, I didn't know. And so I think those things are important. Don't always trust a D. And take that any way you'd like. Don't trust the D. I believe maybe sometimes that's a thing. We'll go here.
My name is Amber, and I have two quick questions. My first question is, I really like how you guys talked about how triggering seeing the symbols and changes can be. And I'm an organizer. I've seen them at rallies, and even when I went out in the booth, there were people that had them on t-shirts and pins, and they're selling them. How do you address the fact that they should be using those symbols and make sure that they know that you're coming from love and not attacking you? forgiving them? So those are my two questions.
I mean, for the hangers, I think it's kind of like the auntie network thing as well, right? You know, when I explain to somebody who says, you know, I'd like to drive someone or I'd like to have someone stay on my couch, what I often say is, somebody should be able to have the most dignified abortion possible. And if we say we care about bodily autonomy, we want to be able to honor that in all ways. And so if someone's having an abortion, if you're offering your couch, that's one more person that they shouldn't have to talk to or know about their abortion. So it's better to honor somebody by helping uplift, and it's a funding thing, somebody to be able to bring the support person they would like, have a hotel room that they can speak about their abortion with the person they want or not be somebody who, if you're staying in somebody's house, forget about the infiltration of antis, you know, the harm that can cause, just from you're going to feel obligated to talk to them. And somebody should just be able to have the abortion they need, right? So thinking about why that doesn't work. When it comes to the hangers, I think you can simply only present. I've said, you know, in my experience talking to those who actually had hangers in their lives, my older sister's best friend went to a place and they sprayed Lysol on a hanger, and that person, you know, and that's a terrible story. And that person doesn't want those images in their face. There are people who are going to say, don't police me. And I can only say from my heart, please don't do this. And if somebody's not going to accept it, I just choose to not be in coalition with them because, and I try to have a more positive message that people will then gravitate to that message and want to be part of that. Because when people reject it, it's rough, it's hard.
I think we have to, oh, sorry.
No,
Laura.
you go.
I think we have to understand the difference between calling people out and calling people in. We have to hold ourselves accountable. We all have internalized biases. The movement changes, and we all kind of have to grow with it. So it's sometimes approaching that conversation like, I understand what you're saying, and I really do get the message behind it, and here are the reasons why we're leaving this behind. I was actually having a conversation this week, and it was a point I hadn't considered when we were talking about the hangers, and this wonderful person I was speaking to said, there are a lot of young people who don't know what the hangers really represent, that part of the movement. We don't want to teach them that. We have so many ways to self-manage abortion that are safe and reputable and vetted that we want to also stay away from the images that bring into it the unsafe ways of doing that. That's just, we aren't at that point anymore. That's not the only way to self-manage your abortion. We have better ways, and we don't want to keep introducing that imagery and making it more of a part of the lexicon for people who might not have known about it.
Yeah, and I'll also say that there are an abundance of amazing abortion funds. I work with the local abortion fund in Nevada, the Wild West Fund. We're pretty new, so check us out. We're pretty rad.
I really like your logo.
Oh, yeah, the cactus.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a cactus with a
It's
cowboy.
cute.
Very cute, yes. I think we call it Mr. Pokey McPokeface. It's not, it's a workshop. It's workshopping. But we just recently put out an infographic guide asking the movement, like gently asking the movement to reconsider using the coat hanger imagery for a plethora of reasons. So that's available on our social media. It caused quite a stir in the movement. There were a lot of white women in particular who were very upset at us attempting to educate and encourage alternative methods of information sharing, like sharing about self-managed abortion with abortion pills. But there are resources out there and abortion funds that are doing good work around this and around shifting that messaging. So I would also look to them for guidance on how best to approach those topics, because they can be tricky and sticky, but there are really great orgs out there making really great resources to help us have these conversations.
What's the name of that fund again, Nevada?
The Wild West Access Fund.
I just wanted to quickly add that in addition to the lost opportunity to talk about self-managed abortion and the triggering imagery, that if there were to be a symbol of the acute harm, it would be jail bars. It also obscures that in the current landscape in
Yes.
2022, Mass incarceration as a result of criminalizing abortion is a still under-discussed aspect of the entire scenario. When you invent a crime, you create more categories of people that will be yanked from their communities and families torn apart and sent to live in prison. The National Association of District Attorneys actually put out a report right before Roe fell, and their whole intro is about, look, we don't want to talk about abortion. No one wants to talk about abortion. We're attorney, we have nothing to do with abortion. But the simple fact that their professional capacity, they're poised at the abyss of the edge of professional capacity to represent the thousands and thousands of people they expect to have to represent. I'm sorry, not District Defenders Association, not district attorneys, because of criminalizing abortion in a landscape where essentially the digital surveillance and law enforcement apparatus, the machine built for the failed war on drugs, is a gaping maw that needs to be fed, and it's pregnant people and people that support pregnant people that they're seeking to throw into it. So that's the third aspect of missed opportunity, I think, from focusing on the hanger.
In fact, we just did a graphic that had a uterus behind bars, and it said private prisons, and it did really well because people were like, oh my God, like what's happening with people of all pregnant, and it's all pregnancy outcomes. Let's talk about it, right? Which is why we used the uterus, because we were specifically talking about miscarriage, all of it, right? And so I think that's the issue we should be talking about. The carceral system is a mess, and it's targeting people on their pregnancy choices, and that is a real issue. That is, I think that's awesome.
Can I say something to her second question first before we move on? You talked about national organizing, trying to move in a local space. As a somewhat national organization, when we were working on Operation Save Abortion and we were scheduling these meetings, we were very deliberate in our approach and coming in and saying, this is what we have planned. What do you need? What is your work? How can we uplift it? How can we amplify it? And how can we help? I think the problem that national orgs largely have is they have a plan and they come in and they say, this is what we're doing, do you want to do it with us? Or this is what we're doing, and that's it, without doing the work of making relationships. So you really have to meet with local and state organizers and groups and get that relationship, that face time, and make sure they know that you want to support their work, you want to help them on the ground, and that's really the basis of where you can go. And once you've established that, once you have those relationships and you've made sure they know that their work is also a priority of yours and that you're not trying to take it over, then you can kind of work in your agenda and say, how can we make this work together? Is this beneficial to you? But ultimately, if your work is not beneficial, if what you're doing is going to take resources away from them and money away from them, then that's when you have to evaluate, what am I doing? And is it ultimately for our own agenda, or is it what's best for that movement?
That's great. I'll go you next.
Okay, so in California, we have an initiative on the ballot that would protect access to abortion in the state. I have heard almost nothing about it in the media. I have seen no polling on it whatsoever. And while California is progressive in many ways, it's got a rocky track record when it comes to passing progressive initiatives, so I am not taking this thing for granted. With limited time, would you suggest I maybe use my time pushing the media to cover this more, or should I just go ahead and volunteer directly with the organization supporting it?
I would say go ahead and volunteer with the organization supporting it. I would also say, as we know with ballot initiatives, make clear that the answer that you want people to answer is clear. And I would say, how are they doing it? But I think come and talk to us at the booth, because I'd like to help uplift that as well. But I lived in California for 6 years. You fucking get a phone book full of instructions on their ballot initiatives. They have 9,000 of them, and it's a mess. So I would like to help you with that, because this is the problem with the progressives. It's going to be fine because we're California, until it's fucking not. So yes, awesome. Thank you. I saw. I'm going to go there, and then I'll go there.
I just have something to add about what you're talking with. I think that erasure in history is not something we should ignore, but I think it's all about market not being like, oh, just like let's tell people about the protesters, and like not have any really disclaimers or information around it, because then it might, like you said, it might float out as like another, like, oh, here's another thing, here's another information. I think that it should be like in safe spaces where like before you get to that information, there should be like a little maybe like a paragraph like, hey, like this can be triggering, and like maybe not like forcing an imagery around and like having it be everywhere but in small spaces so that it's not completely forgotten, because I think that it's like a bloody part of history and I don't want it to be like romanticized, but I also don't want it to be shoved in people's faces, and I don't want anyone to be triggered by it.
Does anybody want to take that before we move on? I mean, I think nobody wants to erase the history, but I also think that you could, I think that there's information available about the history. I think there's information available around it. And I also think it's sort of like, and this is going to sound like a kooky analogy, but remember Free to Be You and Me and how amazing it was when we were kids? And it was like telling young girls they could be whatever they want. And when my sister had her kid, she's like, I'm not having my daughter listen to that because I don't want my daughter to start out thinking there was things that she couldn't be. And we've just moved forward, right? And so framing the hanger in the sense of this is, Cece, I think you said it beautifully. We can move forward on many ways to self-manage our abortion. I don't want to introduce a way that somebody thinks is a way that no longer has to be a way. So it's the balance of that. Yeah. So I think that that's something that we need to think about. So thank you for having us think about the framing on that.
Yeah, and just symbols aren't history any more than a statue of a Confederate soldier is history by knocking it down.
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
Symbols
That's
aren't
right.
history.
And I think we can honor the experiences of people that had illegal abortions and those were the only methods available to them, or they were desperate enough that these were the methods that they reached to, but we have evolved. Science has evolved, medicine has evolved, and we have safer, better options. So I think acknowledging the history and knowing that is valuable, and also the imagery and the information about how we have been able to self-manage abortions now in a much safer, easier way is important to acknowledge.
Yeah, I don't need to visually see everything that happened to people who were put on trial for witchcraft. You know, I just don't need to see every torture device. I don't need to see all of it. I can hear it. And so I think it's a good conversation to have. Thank you. Yes?
So I go to a Christian college, and there's like a pretty consistent discussion on campus about like our health centers not offering, in all kind of lots of Christian colleges in California, not offering like Plan B or like information on abortion as an option. And since the conversation's happening all the time, like it seems like there is a relatively good claim, like at least legally, that there are religious freedom protections for like our campuses. So, and obviously, I mean, even as someone who's pro-choice, like, I believe that religious liberties are really important. There's lots of people within the pro-choice movement who are religious. So I just wanted to know, like, where you guys believe the intersection was between religious liberties and the right to privacy and the right to abortion.
Well, I think religion and being pro-abortion are not mutually exclusive. And
What religion are we talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Over the years, it's really, they've done an excellent job of kind of making those very separate. Like, you can't be religious, you can't have a faith base, and you can't be pro-abortion. And so that work has to kind of be done in our own faith communities. But it's exactly right. What religion are you talking about? Is it Judaism? Is it Islam? Is it Christianity? Like, there are religious freedoms, but every religion has different tenets, and every religion has different beliefs. And should one religion's beliefs and tenets dictate what we do and dictate what we choose with our bodies? And so I think there's a lot of work that has to be done within faith communities themselves, and there are some amazing organizations out there doing that. Catholics for Choice. And yay! You're like, it's me, I got this. You're talking over
Right,
here.
you're like burning to talk. Yeah.
Yes, but people like that who are doing that work of changing that narrative that we can be people of faith and we can be pro-abortion and do that work.
Yeah, and I also want to uplift, as I said earlier, youth and like college students. That's like my bread and butter. I just wanted to uplift this amazing coalition that has been going around called SCRJ. Their Instagram handle is WeAreSCRJ. They're a student-powered nonprofit fighting for reproductive justice at Catholic universities and colleges across the country. They're an incredible network of students that are really trying to expand reproductive health options on campus, even in spite of these really tricky conversations. So if you're looking for ways to navigate those conversations on your campus, that might be a really great resource for you to tap into. And I know some of the folks who founded it, they are incredibly, like just a wealth of knowledge. So I would definitely recommend checking out that coalition.
Yeah, I'll just add that depriving strangers of equitable access to comprehensive evidence-based reproductive health care isn't religious freedom. That's another
Yes.
fiction, like the abortion is controversial, that like abortion and religion are on opposite sides of something. In fact, I would say, the term religious freedom in this context is often used to obscure what we really mean, which is, Christian supremacy. Because if we're talking about religious, that's broad, and there are religions that, some of the abortion bans that we see that are trying to enforce the personal Christian beliefs of a handful of lawmakers on people are actually violating the religious beliefs of people of Jewish faith, people of Muslim faith, and so on. So that's also, I would pop the hood when you hear the phrase religious freedom and see what we're actually talking about. And in terms of experience, Catholic people have as many abortions as people who don't identify as Catholic. And
I've had 3.
And-
as a Catholic. I'm just putting it out there. I've had them for
1 in 4.
everyone.
And most Catholics don't adhere to the beliefs espoused and lobbied by the bishops, right? It's similar to government, having a minority rule and view that's opposite and happens to be oppressive of the everyday people.
And
Yeah.
basically what the college seems to be doing, if they're choosing to not have access to like Plan B, for instance, like you said, is really using their religion under the guise of religious freedom to keep people from accessing a safe legal medication that they can choose to use. It has nothing to do with the religious freedom of any institution. It's actually just barring them from access to health care and medication.
We have time for one more question. Was there one more question, or are we going to wrap? I think we're going to. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to chime in. My name's Ashley. I'm the director of communications and strategy at Catholics for Choice.
Woo!
So very excited. I am really glad you asked your question about religion, and the question that I kind of had for you all is, I know that you all know that organizations like Catholics for Choice exist, but I think that I've been a part of so many conversations at this conference, all across the place, throughout the scope of my career, that talks about abortion without talking about the extremely well-funded elephant in the room, which is the church hierarchy that is opposed to, the beliefs of the many. Abortion is even in the Bible, right? Like, it's not just predates the Bible. And I guess my question for you all is, obviously religion has caused incredible harm and trauma for people, but why are we so bad about talking about the elephant in the room?
I don't know if there's a short answer to that, and we have 1 minute left. What I would say is, I think it's a two-pronged problem, right? I think that when again, it goes back to media a lot to me, and that is the media likes to have a dominant narrative around clownery, makes for good pictures, makes for good stories, and also they dominate. Big, loud, asshole people whose Jesus is no one that any Christian person or good religious person I know has ever met. Jesus would hate them, quite frankly. They get to dominate that, and so how is it that we elevate, Christianity in its highest, most form of service, and what that means, or whatever we're talking about when we're talking about religion. I don't know if you were talking about Catholics in particular, but I think that's a larger conversation that, you can say it all day long, abortion's not in the Bible, and then they'll say, but thou shalt not, and they'll pull out some fucking thing and say it, and you're just like, I I also just sometimes don't have the emotional capacity to give someone legitimacy when they're talking to me with gibberish. It's like the second I engage in that, it's like, not my circus, not my monkey. If I step in front of you and have a conversation, now I am literally listening to you tell me that a person without a uterus can get pregnant because miracles. I gotta go. Like, you know what? I don't know how to separate all that shit out. But like, back to the media, stop indulging anti-abortion people in your fucking media. Stop interviewing them. They never say one thing that's true. They're all opinion-based and never fact-based. And remember that. Anytime there's another side, it's never fact-based because they don't come with facts. They come with their opinions based on shit you may or may not believe. That is not how we do medicine in this country, nor should we. So I'm sorry I just yelled and just did that. But
I think it's also important to remember that with the church aspect, it goes back to, it's not really about abortion, it's about power and control.
yes.
This is there's so much about the church hierarchy and the power and control aspect of the people and what that really means. And so that's where abortion is not really the actual issue. So when they use things and imagery that is, of the big fetuses and it's taking away the humanity and focusing on something that is not really the issue, and it's really power and control.
Mm-hmm.
And if those conversations aren't happening within your faith communities, it's 10 times harder to have them
You need
outside.
you need to start them.
Yes.
If you're in a faith community that's not having those conversations, please sit in your discomfort. I can't take it when they say, I have a racist aunt at Thanksgiving, so I just let it go. Fucking no, that's not okay. Don't invite people of color into your world if you're not going to defend them when they're not there. And it's the same thing with your faith. It's hard, man. It is hard, but you have to. Because you have to trust that someone loves you enough to at least hear you. Because if they're not going to hear you, they're not going to hear any other logic. You need to be the starting point for those conversations. So we have to go, but we're going to continue talking about abortion in 15 minutes with our podcast, Feminist Buzzkill Live. If you want to come over, we're going to be loose, fun, funny, and I'm going to tell you something about how the 1996 Telecommunications Act is fucking terrifying because it has anti-abortion shit in it, and you need to know about it because it's really scary, and some other fun shit. So if you want to come over there, also go to our booth, meet Cece, do all that stuff, do it.
Yes, and Plan C will be having a workshop today at 2 in room 330 if you want to learn more about Plan C pills and how you can spread the word about self-managed abortion.
Oh, thank you. And we're doing an abortion simulation on a papaya at 1:45 at our booth. If you want to see how abortion in the first trimester actually works, come watch. You'll see a papaya being aborted. It's very fun.